Hello YouTubers, today's video is a tour of the Edison and Ford winter estates in Fort Myers, Florida.
To the city of Fort Myers for the first time in 1885. They don't actually start that winter down here though, they start up in St. Augustine. The whole reason Edison's coming to Florida at all, having some breathing issues at the time. And his doctors have told him that this warm winter air here in Florida kind of help you get over that. Well, unfortunately for Edison, 1885 is the year of a big freeze here in the state of Florida, so it is unseasonably cold up in St. Augustine, much like today, and they decide they need to make their way a little further south in the state. Well, as they're coming down, he gets to talking to one of his fishing guides, and they tell him about a place at the mouth of the Caloosahatchee River, known as Punta Rasa, and it's becoming very famous at this time for its tarpon fishing in the area. So they're hanging out, doing a little fishing at the mouth of the river, and Edison notices a number of ships coming up the Caloosahatchee. Being a very curious man, he's interested to see where they're going, so he charters one and comes here to town for the first time that year. Here we do get a look at a couple of structures here on site. First off, the obvious one, this beautiful three-car garage we have on the property. Now there really is just one primary vehicle being used down here. It's a 1916 Model T, and it is a gift from Henry Ford. Well, supposedly Ford wanted to give Edison a brand new car every year for his birthday. Well, Edison's kind of a simple guy, says the first one works, what am I even going to do with a second car? And as a compromise, Ford starts to bring an engineer with him every year for Edison's birthday. And they would just install all the latest updates to that 1916. So he gets odometer, speedometer added onto it, electric headlights, electric start. Just kind of piecemeal it together over the years. If you would like to take a look, it is that black Model T in the front room of our museum across the street. So the more you look at it, the more parts you're going to see that don't really belong in a 1916. That being said, Edison doesn't actually drive. In fact, his children said they tried to teach him once up in New Jersey, and he takes that car into a ditch and almost hits a tree. So they're not big fans of letting him behind the wheel, and he has a chauffeur travel with him year-round. Here in Florida, he'd stay in the rooms right above the garage, and the Edisons have a buzzer up in the main home that rings a bell down here, lets the chauffeur know you need to start the vehicle and go pick the Edisons up, take them wherever they want to go that day. Now, the other structure that I'd like to mention while we are here is actually no longer on the property. In fact, if you take a look over here, we do have Mina Edison's moonlight garden, and that little pond in the middle will reflect the moonlight at night, and it highlights all of the white flowers in the garden there. This is not what's originally in this location, though. If you see those little green posts on the side, they mark the original footprint for Edison's 1887 laboratory here on the property. You might wonder why that's not here anymore. Seems like a fairly important piece of history for us to hang on to. And you can thank Henry Ford for it not being here today. As a bit of an odd hobby, he collects historic buildings. So if you ever go to Dearborn, Michigan, they have Greenfield Village up at the Henry Ford Museum, and that is where he has rescued all of these buildings from across the country too, including Edison's Menlo Park Laboratory, the Wright Brothers Bicycle Shop, building the Webster's are printing dictionaries out of, and the 1887 lab from here in Fort Myers. Now he takes it 1928, it's the same year Edison's building that new lab across the street, so this one's just kind of a storage shed. Tells his friend Ford, if you really want it, come on down and take it. So he does. They come down, deconstruct the building, load it up onto a train, and ship it to Michigan. Well, they don't really tell Mina Edison before they do this, so she comes home to a huge mess in the middle of her garden, and she's not real happy. So she would sit down and have a little conversation with Henry and convince him to provide the funding to construct the moonlight garden as well as that small study out back. So secret #1 rule here on site, don't make Mina mad. She will get evil. Been warned. We're going to go ahead and make our way down the path here. Nice little look out at the Caloosahatchee River. Now, if you're not from the area or you're not real familiar with this body of water, if you were to take a big inner tube and set it out there in the river and let the current carry you away, it's going to take you about 9 miles down in that direction until you come out in San Carlos Bay, right where the Causeway Island, south into Sanibel, north into Estero Island where Fort Myers Beach is, and that's where the Caloosahatchee dumps out into the Gulf. Well, today you can go the other direction up this river all the way to Lake Okeechobee. You can take the locks, get into the levee, go all the way around the lake, down the locks on the far side into the St. Lucie River, and from there all the way to the Atlantic. And that's because this is part of the Intercoastal Waterway today. Well, due to that, the Army Corps of Engineers comes through and they dredge this out to keep it nice and deep for us. It's currently 13 foot in the center channel, so deep. But in the Edison's time, the center of the river, 8 foot deep, which means if you want to unload anything off of your boats and barges on site, your pier needs to go all the way to the center channel. Now, these concrete pilings are not original. These are actually put in the 1960s in an attempt to rebuild the pier. It's been destroyed about 7 times. It does not do well during hurricanes or big storm surges. So we're just leaving these as a representation. It's a little more cost effective. But the Edisons, the pier would have been 3 times as far out into the river as this goes today. They currently go out about 500 feet, and the Edison's pier would have been closer to 1,500. That's a big deal because for the first 20 years, this is the only way on or off the property. Everything's coming in right here, including both of the homes we're about to go look at. These are prefabricated up in Maine, essentially prefabbed homes before anyone's buying, selling, or manufacturing them. They load them onto barges and ship them down the entire East Coast. Well, the Intercoastal Waterway does not exist yet, so you've got to go all the way to Key West and around the tip of Florida, back up the Gulf Coast, up the Caloosahatchee, and then unload all that lumber off your 1,500-foot pier. 30 local laborers construct both of these homes on site in 12 weeks. Yeah, get a permit in 12 weeks and let me know how that goes. Fortunately, these do not look like they would have for our date of interpretation, which is 1929, and it's mostly in response to the hurricanes. Charlie about 16 years ago did a real number to the estates, and then Irma just over a year ago, we lost over 100 trees and close to 260 plants in total. It was a big mess, and we spent about a month and a half just doing cleanup on this side of the property. Now since then, last couple months, we have put almost 80 to 100 new trees into the ground, so we're making a comeback. Unfortunately, those new trees, like the two just to your side, are not near as large and heavily vegetated as the original. So it's going to take us a few years for them to grow back and get looking good. But when the Edisons are here in 1929, there is so much vegetation growing on the property, you would not be able to see the river from the porches we're going to be standing on. It would have just been a wall of green here. So, not quite like that today. You'll just have to use your imagination just a little bit. But we're going to make our way up here and we're going to get a good look into the homes themselves. There are going to be a lot of artifacts inside. And when I told you that Meyers sells this to the city in 1947, she does include everything inside the homes. So today, about 70% of what we'll see inside is still original to the Edisons. The biggest majority that is no longer original, paper products. Books, magazines, newspapers, photographs, they just don't do well in the humidity of South Florida, and we like to leave the doors open as much as possible so that you can see inside. So all of the original paperwork we have removed to the archives across the street so we can keep it in a climate-controlled environment, and everything you'll see inside are going to be represented in pieces. So we'll get a good look into the library, and then we'll kind of get a peek into the master bedroom over here at this end of the home. Now inside you are going to notice a number of fixtures hanging from the ceilings in here, and these are original Edison lighting fixtures. I do have to be careful when I tell people about these because the bulbs inside of those fixtures are not original. I'm sorry if someone has told you that. We do not have any bulbs burning from Edison's time on the property. These are all modern replicas. It's a tungsten filament running a low wattage just to make them look old-timey. In fact, we sell them at the gift shop. Yeah, there is original glass in the windows. Now some panes have been replaced over the years. I could not point out and tell you which is which. Now the exterior. Carried away with what I'm going to tell you about. We do have Thomas's fish up there on the front side of the home. Small one underneath it is a juvenile, and that's just to make his look a little bigger. But these beautiful porches that we are enjoying right now are not originally as wide as they are today. In fact, the 13.5-foot porch that you're standing on right now is doubled. In fact, this small section that you came through after the kitchen is the original width for all of the porches going around both of these homes. They're only about 7 foot wide. Well, around 1912, 1913, they're doing a number of renovations to the homes, and a tree actually comes down and crushes a large section of the porch on the building next door. Well, when that happens, they decide they're going to rebuild it from scratch, and had enjoyed the porches so much, they decide to stretch them out to the 13.5 foot we see them at today. Well, once you have done that to the home next door, you have 2 identical buildings, one with a beautiful 13.5 foot porch and the other with a 7 foot, and they do not look so identical anymore. So they decide they need to stretch this porch out to match, and they do just that. If you take a look up, you can see where all of these beams have been sistered together to stretch it out the additional 7 foot. Now, if you take a look at the porch in the main home next door, you're not going to see that because it is just single length beams since it's rebuilt from scratch. Now the reason this section gets left at that original 7-foot width, this is the servant's entrance, and they do not need a nice fancy 13-foot wide porch. So we just leave it at the original size, which is nice for us today because I get to show off the difference that doubling the width of these porches really makes. You go from a very tight, narrow space over here to these lovely wide porches. You can put a table and some chairs, really kind of sit out here and enjoy those nice Florida evenings. But with that, I'm going to drag you guys right back through this short section of porch, and we're going to make our way over to Ford's home. But this little white picket fence that we are passing through does mark the end of Edison's original 13.5-acre property. So as we come through, we're stepping onto 4.5 acres purchased by Ford in 1916. So we're going to slip into the garage here. We're going to talk a little bit about how these two guys meet and become friends. But more than anything, it's a great excuse to show off the cool cars I've got in the garage back here. So I do like to start this portion of the tour by letting you guys know none of these vehicles were owned by Edison or Ford. These have all just been donated by local individuals, so we can have a cool little car display over here to show you. We do have a number of historic vehicles, but we keep them in the museum and try to preserve them a little better. The cool thing about the Ford over here, though, all of them are in running condition. So Monday mornings, our automotive curator does one of these specialty tours here on site. They talk about the historic vehicles in the museum. He brings them over here, and they pull a couple of these out, and they start them up on the tour. So really kind of cool if you get the opportunity to do that. It's really neat seeing these guys run. But it is in 1891 that Henry Ford gets a job working for the Detroit Edison Illumination Company. And that's really when he gets the opportunity to go to a conference and meet Thomas Edison for the first time. Well, if you're Henry Ford, you are 16 years younger than Edison, and this is a chance to meet your idol, the inventor of the age, the Wizard of Menlo Park. And so when Ford has this chance, he would sketch out a drawing of his quadricycle to show to Edison. Now, if you've never seen Ford's quadricycle, we do have a Norman Rockwell painting there in the back. That's Henry and Clara Ford hanging out with the quadricycle in their garage. When he shows this to Edison, Edison would tell Ford, this is a great idea, you should carry this forward, young man. And Ford, throughout his life, says this is one of the most inspiring things ever said to him. Really gives him the drive to continue trying to create Ford Motor. He does kind of need that inspiration because Ford has two failed car companies before he gets to Ford. First one's the Detroit Automotive Company. They're making delivery vans. They're not real popular, they don't make a lot of them, and that company goes bankrupt within the first year. So he decides he needs to try again, but he gets some investors behind him this time, so he's got some money backing him up, feels more confident, and names this one the Henry Ford Motor Company. Well, unfortunately, those investors want a luxury vehicle, and that is the exact opposite of what Ford is trying to produce. So they butt heads for several months and eventually kick Ford out of his own company. Well, you cannot remain the Henry Ford Motor Company if you have just removed Henry Ford, so they've got to pick a new name. And the one they end up selecting, Cadillac. About 8 years later, they get bought out by General Motors and still remain GM's luxury brand even today. But third time's the charm. 1903, he does start the Ford Motor Company as we now recognize it, but he doesn't produce the Model T back there until 1908. He would spend 5 years producing what historians refer to as his alphabet cars. And it starts with the Model A. Not this Model A. This doesn't come out until 1927. The original A that Ford would produce is much closer to that quadricycle. Ford bicycle tires, engines right into your seat, little tiller arm to steer it with. Not a real comfortable ride. They don't produce many. They quickly move on to the B, and then the C, D, E, F, and he works his way through the alphabet until they finally get to the T in 1920. This is what he likes, and they decide to put it in full-scale production. They're originally selling for around $800 a piece. It's still pretty expensive. The average worker is making about $600 a year. Most cars, though, being sold close to $2,000 a piece. So he's cut the price in half, and the Model T is immediately popular. And they're not able to get into the famous price of $250, $300 for a brand new vehicle until long after he gets that moving assembly line perfected in his factory. It's 1913. And truly, you don't see prices that low until you get to the peak of Model T production. 1920, 1921, that's really when you see the price start to bottom out on these. But before all of that really happens, 1910, Ford Motor Company's just getting going, a little air under their wings with the Model T production, and Ford decides to do some renovations to one of his offices up in Dearborn. And that's when he would send a letter to Thomas Edison asking for an autograph photo. That way he can put it up in his office, a little tribute to the man who inspired him. Well, Edison obliges, sends Ford the autograph photo, and invites him over for dinner. And this is really where Edison gets to meet Ford for the first time. I told you they met at that conference. Edison is asked a number of times throughout his life if he remembers giving Ford this inspirational message. Not even a little bit. You gotta understand, Edison is a very famous inventor, and there is a line of young men coming up trying to show off inventions to see what he thinks. In all reality, when he met Ford that first time, he's probably being polite. Yep, this is a great idea. You should carry this forward, young man. Now move along, because I got Edison things I gotta take care of. But 1910, when Ford comes over for dinner, these guys really hit it off. They're very similar in their inventing process, very hands-on. Love to tinker and see how things work and how they might be improved. So over the next few years, they develop a very student-mentor kind of relationship. Edison's excited to encourage a young man who's having a little success in the industry, and Ford is thrilled someone as great as Edison's willing to listen to some ideas and give him some feedback. So they hang out a number of times over the next couple of years, and in 1914, Edison invites Henry Ford and his good friend John Burroughs down here at Fort Myers. And that's when they all go camping out in the Everglades together. Which, let's be real honest, sounds absolutely terrible. I don't know why you want to go camping out in the swamps of the Everglades, but these are intelligent men, and we are sure of it, because they only do it once. Up north, they go to the Adirondacks, Shenandoah, River Valley, California, Upper Peninsula of Michigan one year. Much, much nicer venues than the swamps of the Everglades. But the reason that trip is so important to us, not only does it happen down here, but it's also where we really start to see a shift in their relationship, from this very student-mentor kind of interaction to them becoming very close friends. And it is just 2 years after that camping trip that Ford buys this property right next door to Edison. So if you guys are ready, we're going to make our way out here, and we're going to go take a look at the Ford home. This is actually constructed by a gentleman named Robert Smith. And he would build his home right on this property because it's next door to Thomas Edison. And building your home next to someone famous, always a good real estate move. Unfortunately, the rest of his money is not so wisely invested, as he has put a large portion of it into European stocks and bonds. 1916 is not a good year to have your money in European stocks and bonds because World War I's going on. So, being a little cash poor, he decides to sell this home to Henry Ford, includes a bunch of pictures, describes the property. It's right here in beautiful, sunny Fort Myers. It's next to your best friend, Thomas Edison. I only want $25,000 for the place. Well, Ford sends him a letter back and says, I love the looks of it. It sounds very lovely, but I'm going to go ahead and take your second offer. And he includes a check for $20,000. That is what he pays for this home at the time. Now, when Ford buys it, it is just the center portion of the building. He adds both of the wings that we see today. The one on the Edison side does have the bedroom for the maid as well as the secretary. And then the far side of the home, we have a guest bedroom that gets added on as well. So we're going to make our way up onto the central portion of the porch and get a good look inside the home here. Snowbirds here in town, and they're spending 3 or 4 months out of the year down here, usually January to April most of the time. Ford is only on site about 2 weeks every year. That's it. He is only coming down here to celebrate Thomas Edison's birthday. Yeah, I guess you feel bad taking up the guest room next door for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, so we'll just buy the house next to you. I hadn't figured that one out. But you are Henry Ford, you've got the money, so might as well enjoy yourself. Why not? What it really means for our tour today, though, I don't have near as many cool stories to tell you guys about Henry Ford over here as I do about Edison next door, mostly because he's just not here very much. But 1931, after Edison dies, Ford really does not like coming down here. So it brings up too many memories of the time he spent with his friend and was here in town. They purchased this home from Henry Ford in 1945 for $20,000, the exact price he paid for it in 1916. When asked why, he said he didn't want to profit off the death of his good friend Edison. It's very sentimental about the home. Unfortunately for us, when the Bigger family moved in here, they were not so sentimental, and they get rid of all the original Ford furniture. So we're over at the Edison home. About 70% of what you see inside is original to the family. Nothing here at the Ford home is. These are all representative antiques. We've gone through journals and photographs, worked with the Ford Museum up in Michigan, tried to recreate it as close as we can. But if you have ever gone antique hunting for very specific items, it is a nightmare. So I think they've done a pretty nice job, but all of these are representative pieces. Now, the Bigger family actually lived here until 1988. So if you had come to see us before 1990, we would have only been the Edison Winter Estates, and they would not have told you that Ford lived here, because that just encouraged people to come up to the fence and peek over to try to see what was going on, and the homeowners were not huge fans of that. So they do decide to sell this to the city in 1988. Does anyone want to take a guess at how much they sell it for?
1988, 1.5 million.
Oh, someone read my sign. Cheaters. That's all right. But they do sell it to the city for $1.5 million. Just a little bit more than that $1 mine the one for next door. And while it does sound like a lot of money, the city has an insurance agency come in and evaluate the property, and they place the actual value between $5 and $6 million. So 1.5 was really a pretty sweet deal for the city. Now, since then, around 2006, the nonprofit has taken over operation of the facilities here, and they have spent $14 million doing restorations to all the historic buildings on site. So that is the big reasons that everything looks as nice as it does today. But the big reason I like to mention it here is because in my mind, this is where the worst restoration project took place on site. When this home is built in 1911, it's constructed out of local lumbers because there is a mill here in town. So the floors here are actually yellow pine, the shingles are slash, and these ceilings are actually cypress wood. Well, when the bigger family lived here, they painted all of these ceilings white. Yeah, so one of the fun projects we got to do was strip all of that paint off of the ceilings here on the building, and we do fun projects like that when attendance is low. So, summertime, June, July, August, 90, 95 degrees, 90% humidity, and you're up on a ladder with paint thinner trying to strip the ceilings off. I'm real glad I was not employed here when they did that. I got to miss out on it. And I think it's perfect, and we should never have to retouch it or do anything else with it again. Good to go.
I hope you enjoyed this tour of the Edison and Ford winter estates, and if you like this video, please hit that thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and most of all, thanks for watching.